Welcome everyone to another episode of the Walkoff. We are officially in the heart, we're about to get to the heart of the offseason. It's just starting off right now. We have our first big free agent signing, which we thought we were going to get last week, but this week it finally comes to fruition. We got a lot of different small trades, nothing too big, too out of the ordinary. But a lot of fun stuff to talk about. I'm Vince McCone, of course. I'm joined with my always amazing co-host Anthony Walsh and Justin Randell. Guys, how are we doing today?
Doing pretty good.
Doing pretty well.
I love to hear it. I love to hear it. So we have a lot of trades to go through. So I should just say we jump straight into the action. The Braves have been making some different moves, none of which I thought have really bolstered them up. They traded for Nicky Lopez this deadline. They trade him away this time around. They trade him, Mike Soroka, Jared Schuster, and Braden Shemake over to the south side of Chicago just for Aaron Bummer. It didn't seem to even up at all. I mean, I understand Mike Soroka, who's coming off of some injuries. We talked about his first start back. He versus the A's. I think he had a little bit of trouble, but we didn't really talk about him since then. He went 2-2 this year with a 6.40 ERA and 29 strikeouts. He's the big name in that trade, but I really think actually, in my opinion, since Tim Anderson is now gone on the White Sox, Nicky Lopez will be the big guy on the south side of Chicago.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by this because Bummer, I mean, he's had some okay years and a good year in 2022, but this past season was just terrible. And so they're taking a gamble on him. I mean, I don't know. I'm not totally against that. I'm not totally for it necessarily if I'm a Braves fan. I think it's kind of a low risk, high reward scenario. I don't think they're really risking that much. And if it works out, then good for them. I don't think it's going to be something that they totally rely on, though. And if it is, then I'll be surprised. That'd be stupid.
I'm just interested in why did they go? I mean, I understand like he's had some solid years. He's been in the league now for 7 years. All of them have been with the White Sox, and his 2020 campaign was good. His 2019 campaign was good. Actually, all the way from 2019 to 2022 was really good. But this year, he just did not have it whatsoever.
Yeah, good, Justin.
Oh yeah, no. Well, just as far as the trade goes, like I agree with you. Like, of course, Aaron Bummer has had a solid career coming out of the pen for the White Sox, but I like this deal. For the White Sox, you get Soroka, who, of course, you mentioned before. He's had some injury problems as of late, but you look back at his 2019 stats. I have it right here. I know it was 3 years ago or 4 years ago, but looking at his numbers, he won 13-4 with an ERA under 3. So he's a solid starter, to add to your rotation if you're the White Sox. Of course, you still have Dylan Cease, who is possibly going to be on the move sometime during this offseason. That'll be to be determined. But, as far as the White Sox are going, like they're trying to build up their team. I don't really see them being in like a huge rebuild phase at the moment. But, getting a solid 2 or 3 starter added to your rotation, I think it's a good move, in my opinion, for the White Sox.
Yeah, I mean, the White Sox, obviously, this is not a move that is incredibly revolutionary. It still comes with injury prone on Nicky Lopez, who, I mean, I have to say, when the Braves traded for Nicky Lopez, I thought he was going to be, a big guy for them in years to come. But if you're trading him right now, I mean, he plays second base. Albies is kind of stuck at second base for however long he wants to play because the Braves are not going to take him out whatsoever. Having that said, uh, there this isn't the only trade that the Braves made. They also go out and they trade Nick Anderson to the Royals just for cash. Nick Anderson, obviously not one of the biggest guys in this pen again, but a guy that you could take out from the pen. He had 1 save this year in 35 innings, but he had a 3.06 ERA. I mean, it's solid stats. That's what they were mostly looking for in Bummer this year. The White Sox were mostly looking for that from Bummer. They didn't get that, and Nick Anderson is just traded to the Royals. I think this is a good pickup for the Royals.
Yeah, I don't really understand this because I mean, honestly, I never really understand cash deals unless you're a franchise that's like the Oakland A's, I guess, or now the Las Vegas A's. Um, but I don't look at the Braves as a team that necessarily is desperate for cash. So I don't know what went behind this deal. Again, like not like Nick Anderson's anything special, but he's been a mediocre reliever, and relievers are very hard to come by. So a mediocre reliever is kind of high valued. And so I'm kind of surprised that at least was one minor leaguer wasn't, given up for this. I don't know. I mean, the fact that they gave up, or that the White Sox got so much for Aaron Bummer, and they got cash, in this deal for Nick Anderson. I don't know. It just strikes me as weird. I don't know what went behind those decisions.
Yeah, I agree with you, Anthony. Like, as far as the Braves are concerned, money's not really an issue for them. I mean, give granted, we're seeing talks about Otani for crying out loud, even though that may not even happen. But as far as this trade goes, like you mentioned it, like getting solid relievers is hard to come by, and by giving up Nicky Anderson, he's a solid reliever. I'm not saying he's a top guy out of the pen, but as far as trying to build up a championship team, Nicky Anderson is one of those mediocre relievers that you would like to have on your team. And, by the Braves giving him away, I just don't really understand what direction they're really headed in.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. I mean, usually we see very evened up deals, some deals that, are for cash, but these deals just weren't adding up for sure.
I
And
see
then
right here they traded Kyle Wright and Nick Anderson for Jackson Kowar, who I assume is a
it
um
was two different deals.
that's two
It
different deals.
was,
Okay.
yeah. So Jackson Kowar was traded for Kyle Wright, which is the next trade that the Braves made, the final trade that the Braves made. But I mean, that's for the damage stops. Kyle Wright, another guy who has dealt with some injuries, but had back in 2021 led the major leagues in wins, with a little over 20. Uh, but another good pitcher that you could see have a bounce back career. I think some of the ideas going behind, oh, well, we're trading these guys, we're gonna make some moves here, is because they're young talent, but with injury prone. And when you could have, more roster spots taken up by people that are going to be playing, um, if you get the like, the more people you get on the roster would be better for the Royals and all these people. But Kyle Wright, Nick Anderson, I wouldn't say Nick Anderson, but Mike Soroka for sure are kind of taking up space on these Atlanta teams.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yep.
And there was a couple other deals that went down, nothing as big as those ones. I mean, those were definitely the biggest ones. Some other ones we saw Luis Urias go from Boston to Seattle. A deal that I really like, really like. Cal Quantrill goes from Cleveland to Colorado. They DFA'd him a little bit earlier. I'm not saying he'll have an insane success over in Colorado, but he is still a young player. He's 28. I still see a little bit of a future. It's kind of coming up on him, but I can see something happening in his career for sure. And then we saw Scott Barlow go from the Padres to the Guardians. The one trade that I really liked, another Cal Quantrill deal, is Vidal Brujan being traded from Tampa to Miami. He used to be a top prospect. He is not anymore. But it's a good deal. They didn't have to give up too much. They gave up two minor leaguers for him. And I think he could be a Jazz Chisholm type, maybe at the shortstop position.
Only 25 years old, so you never know. He doesn't have too much major league experience. Obviously, the numbers he's put up are nothing special, and that's why he's kind of a name that maybe people haven't heard of. But he's played in 99 games through 3 years. So how much do we really know at 25 years old? Yeah, another low risk, high reward deal. I'd be fine with it for sure. Any guys you could get that are still somewhat young, might as well give them a shot.
Yeah, I think it's worth a gamble as well. Like, especially with the Marlins, like they are known in recent history to now try to build up that young talent. As you mentioned, of course, Jazz Chisholm. Now you have Yuri Perez, who is building to become a future star in the MLB as well. So I think it is worth a gamble if you're the Marlins, trading for a second baseman here. Maybe develop him a little bit in AAA or something, and maybe at some point during this upcoming season he'll get a shot in the majors. But as you mentioned, it's low risk, possibly high reward deal. So, I think it's a good trade for the Marlins.
I like it. Now moving away from trades and into a little bit of free agency news, it has finally started off. We are finally started. I think everyone was waiting for it to get started. Aaron Nola is the first player off the market. He's going to go back to Philly for 7 years. I don't actually have the numbers in front of me for how long the deal is, but I will
It's
tell you right now.
it's 7 years, 172 million.
There we go. Again, Philly, putting their money where their mouth is and bringing Nola back. There was reports out there that there was deals in the making from other teams like the Cardinals that were giving him more money, but he decided to take less money and stay in Philly. At first, as a Phillies fan, I was a little indifferent about it because Nola is a streaky player. He had a 4.46 ERA this year, which is, nothing to brag about. And saying that after having a 4.46 ERA, you get a 7-year, $172 million contract is kind of insane. But when I heard that he decided to take less money to play in Philly again, it kind of shows. It shows that Dave Dombrowski doesn't really care about bringing in new players as much as he cares about keeping that core of players that he had, which I think fans can get behind for sure.
Yeah, I think he's going to eventually have to change that strategy, though, because these guys are starting to get older. And signing a 30-year-old to a 7-year deal is risky, especially a 30-year-old that hasn't been an all-star since 2018.
It's
So
true.
but I understand the thought process behind it. You do want people in your organization that want to be there. It goes a long way. There's plenty of talent that goes elsewhere. I think we saw with Justin Verlander in the Mets this season. Did Justin Verlander really want to be a Met? I don't know. Let's be real. And so I think you want to have guys that want to be where they are. But in that same breath, do you really want to be paying this guy, if you do the math, it's like 20 something million per year? I don't know. By the time he's about 34, 35, and to all the way up until 37, I wouldn't really want to be paying that. But who knows? Sometimes guys have career resurgences, and he's not terrible by any means. He's a solid pitcher. But I just feel like those numbers are only going to get worse as he gets older and out of his prime.
Yeah, and I have mixed emotions about it too. Like, as far as being a Mets fan and having Aaron Nola back with Philly, it's not something you really want to see, as Aaron Nola has had some pretty good success when he faced against the Mets. But as far as the length of the contract, I think it was a little bit too much, especially for a guy with his age at 30 years old. But you know, you mentioned it perfectly. Like, you want guys that do want to stay with that same organization, especially since Nola was with the Phillies his entire career. And so it just shows that he wants to be with the Phillies for the long run. And, in these past 2 years, the Phillies were so close to winning that World Series. And I think in Aaron Nola's mind, he feels that he wants to be a part of this group and get over the hump at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, Phillies fans love him. Phillies players love him, which is always good to hear. In the press conference today, he said, I really want to bring a World Series to Philly, which, every single player has any press conference, they say they want to bring a World Series to New York. They want to bring a World Series to Boston. They want to bring a World Series to Kansas City. We'll have to see if it happens. I'd be very excited if it happens, but as much as I love this deal, it's still a rough deal for the Phillies. They want to still go for Yamamoto, and I think kind of signing Nola takes them out of the running for that, but they say otherwise. I don't know. In other contract news, this happened a little bit earlier. Ronaldo Lopez is signing a 3-year contract with Atlanta. So they lose some relief pitching and they get it back in Ronaldo Lopez. Lopez an extremely talented reliever. We saw him in Chicago, and then we saw him for Cleveland a little bit. I forget how he did with Cleveland, but for Chicago, I mean, he was lights out at points. He had 6 saves on the season, a 3.27 ERA, and 83 strikeouts. It'll be another good piece for that Atlanta bullpen.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's very underrated. He's a guy that doesn't get brought up very much when it comes to really good relievers, but I like the deal. It's they're not giving up too much money. Obviously you need some bullpen help, and Lopez is underrated name. He's not the flashy name. He's not the big offseason signings, but a lot of these offseason signings that are big and flashy haven't worked out. So, and it's all, if anything, it's been proven moves like these could help you win a World Series. So, yeah, I have no issue with the move. I'd be happy with it.
And
Yeah.
let's just take a minute to realize, like, this is the Braves that we're talking about here. And anytime the Braves sign someone, whether it's a long-term deal or a short-term deal, they for some reason find a way to turn them into all-stars right from the jump. And don't get me wrong, Lopez was already a solid player to begin with, but just on recent history, I think the three of us can agree here that the Braves have had their fair share of turning mediocre players into what seems to be all-star caliber players. But as far as the length of the contracts, you guys are right. Like, it's a short-term deal, I would say, not too much money given up, and he could be a really solid piece for the future of the Braves.
And I think it'll be good for him to stay for one team for a while. I mean, in 2023, he pitched for 3 teams. That's a lot of moving and jumping around, and he managed to still have really solid numbers. And I think it really helps, especially for a reliever, to know, your team, to know your rotation, to know when you might come into a game. That's big. And he's just getting into his prime. So, like you said, the Braves always just find a way to make really economical deals and get the best out of guys. So I think you honestly will probably see the best out of Ronaldo Lopez in this deal, which sickens me to say, obviously, but it's the truth. The Braves have yet to prove otherwise. The only thing that they've have kind of fallen into is the chokers in the playoffs trope, which they still need to break. But and as far as the regular season goes, they're regular season champions for whatever that means.
Yeah, I mean, you can guarantee that Lopez, who I totally forgot, Anthony. Yeah, he got traded from the White Sox to the Angels in the Lucas Giolito trade. And then when the Angels DFA'd him and Giolito, they went to Cleveland. Right? Yeah.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly bingo. Okay. So you can imagine he'll be getting some big spots. They have some good reliever. I know they brought up Sean Schuster, Gene Schuster Jr. For some big spots this year. But Atlanta, I mean, you guys summed it up perfectly. They are a bulldozer of a team. They can bring mediocre players and these great players. I mean, if Ozzy Albies was playing anywhere, would you know his name? Probably not, sadly. And the same thing goes for Travis d'Arnaud. I know Mets fans would know him, but he's had some. I mean, he was an all-star for the Braves. Another deal, which doesn't mean this much, but I would like to know your take on it for a different reason. Lance Lynn signs a 1-year deal worth $10 million with the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals said earlier, they stated that they wanted to have they wanted 2 solid starting pitchers for the next year coming up. They lost Jack Flaherty last year. They traded him to Baltimore. They're losing Adam Wainwright this year, who struggled incredibly this year and was awful. But nonetheless, he was, there for a very long time. They're left with virtually nothing. How do you think this Lance Lynn deal affects them?
It's low risk. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it. I think Lance Lynn, his best days are behind him. Could you get maybe a solid year out of him? Maybe. I think it's 50-50. It's a toss of a coin. He did have an all-star year in 2021, and I want to mention that because I want to make it seem like he hasn't been good in forever. But if you look ever since then, it's really fallen off. This past season, he had a terrible year. And I don't know. He's been in the league a very long time, since 2011. He's got a lot of miles on his arm. We're talking about, 1,800 innings pitched, close to 1,900 innings pitched. And that's a lot. And so it's not a high risk. I know I said this 9,000 times. It's not a high risk deal. And these are the kind of deals we usually see very early into the offseason. But I don't expect much out of the deal.
Yeah, I agree with you. And like again, Lance Lynn is an older player, an older pitcher. But I just don't really see what direction the Cardinals are going in right now. Of course, last year was a major disappointment, record wise for the team. Um, but as far as like this offseason's going right now, the direction that they're headed in, I don't really know how Cardinals fans are feeling in the moment. I feel like it's like a little bit of a mix. Like, yeah, it is a low risk for Lance Lynn, but at the same time, do you really think he's going to have a great year given that he's been in the league for so long and just this and that? But again, like I just pulled it up really quickly. You mentioned how really weak the Cardinals are. Starting pitcher wise, as of right now, as I'm seeing it, they have Miles Michaelis, Drew Rom, and Zach Thompson are the only starters right now that are under contract with the Cardinals, and now you're adding Lance Lynn to that mix. I just don't really see really stable, starting five rotation for this team, given that they have such talented bats that I just don't know how it's going to work together.
And now Lance Lynn was another part of that Chicago White Sox team this year, but he got traded to the Dodgers, where he had one of the worst moments in postseason history. We know that in the third inning, he gave up 4 home runs to the Diamondbacks in a crucial must-win situation, which led the Dodgers to get swept. Now, as you guys said, his best days are behind him. It's over. His best days though were in St. Louis, so I can understand bringing him back, but he's 36. He's going on 37. Then when the season starts, he'll be 37, or he'll be closer. He'll be days away from 37. I think this is an interesting deal. I would imagine he's there for just veteran help. He's kind of the Adam Wainwright now of the team. He was there when Adam Wainwright was good. Now he is the Adam Wainwright of the team. But I can't imagine this being a good year for St. Louis. I don't think he's there to be great. I think he's just there for veteran presence. Some trade rumors coming out of St. Louis is Tommy Edman and Dylan Carlson are gaining a lot of hot stove action from a lot of different teams. I've heard the Yankees. I've heard the Mariners in some respects. But as we get closer as we get deeper into the offseason, we'll see how many of these guys actually make a move. But again, I agree with you guys. Now, in some more fun news, the 2024 Hall of Fame ballot was released. I mean, you can look it up, you can see it, but is there any guys from this ballot? I have it on my phone. Is there any guys from this ballot that anyone really thinks are for sure?
I took a brief look at it. I don't know. I saw, just to obviously was bolted out at me that David Wright is on there and he's not gonna make it. Returning candidate, I'll go down the list real quick. Some new candidates: Jose Bautista, Adrian Beltre, Bartolo Colon, Adrian Gonzalez, Matt Holliday, Victor Martinez, Joe Mauer, Brandon Phillips, Jose Reyes, James Shields, Chase Utley, David Wright, maybe Chase Utley. I don't know how you guys feel about that. Maybe as for newcomers,
I'll say
outside of that,
from a Chase Utley fan standpoint, he does not deserve to be in the Hall. But with Scott Rowland getting in the Hall, I mean, there's a lot of names that could definitely get in there. I'll say that I think the guys that should definitely get in there is Joe Mauer and Adrian Beltre. Adrian Beltre is a lock. He has 3,000 hits. That's the magic number right there. I think for everyone else, I would like to see Todd Helton, but I doubt he gets in. I would like to see Carlos Beltran, but I doubt he gets in. And that's all I think. Those are the only legitimate candidates. I think, excuse me. I think people will say Francisco Rodriguez, who is an amazing relief pitcher and is up there on the saves list, but I think his career was so long, and it wasn't as many good years as there was just decent years, and that's why he got so many saves.
Fair enough. You don't think Andrew Jones has any shot with that glove?
I would like to see it. This is the one thing I think Andrew Jones will get in because of how other Hall of Famers have said that he should definitely be in the Hall. Like Chipper Jones, when he got in, said that he should be in the Hall. Even Fred McGriff, when he got in, said that Andrew Jones should be in the Hall of Fame, like in their speech. So I would imagine he'll get in, but I don't know.
What do you
Yeah,
think?
well, I'm just looking at the list right now, and all I see popping up is just Alex Rodriguez.
Well,
And
that ain't happening.
no, I know obviously that's not going to happen. I mean, I'm seeing it under the long shot category, but as far as that, I do agree with you, Anthony. Andrew Jones should have some major consideration to get into the Hall of Fame as well. He does have a wicked glove and all of that, but I mean, for sure, the locks that, as you mentioned, of course, were I would say Joe Mauer and Adrian Beltre for sure. I mean, those are two of the all-time greats. You mentioned it with the 3,000 hits, of course, but it's a big class, and it's hard to pick out certain players to make it in. Of course, as a Mets fan, I would hope David Wright or Carlos Beltran would get in, but I mean, those are just two unlikely players to get in right now. Not saying that it can't happen in the future, but yeah, for sure, Beltre and Mauer are my top two.
I'll say this, and I'm curious here, Vincent, because you're an outside perspective. I don't think David's ever going to get in. I don't think he did enough. I love David, but I just don't think he did enough. Beltran, I think, as the years go on, people forget the Astros sign stealing scandal. He'll get in because based on merit alone, he obviously has all the accolades. It's the sign stealing scandal. It's the same way A-Rod has the whole steroid thing that is keeping him out. It's the same kind of thing. So I'm curious, Vincent, what do you think? Do you think either David or Beltran got a shot?
I'm gonna say, and I think of David Wright, who I loved, who I loved. I think of him the same way as I think of Alfonso Soriano, where they had great careers and they were great in the moment. I mean, amazing, but injuries prone them so much. I mean, it's just part of the game. I You can't say someone could have been a Hall of Famer but got beat with so many injuries. It's the exact same thing that happened with Johan Santana. It's just it sucks, but I don't think David Wright's a Hall of Famer, and I think it's because of that.
It's fair. What about Beltran?
I like Beltran. I agree with you. He does have the accolades, and I think he just needs a couple of years. I don't think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think it'll take maybe 2 or 3. You want to know why? I'll say I think it'll take 2 or 3 because there's not many names except for like Ichiro and Cabrera coming up in my head right now that have retired and will be coming in as first ballot Hall of Famer soon. And it seems like every time that there's not necessarily Hall of Fame talent, they go to the next best, which is not necessary whatsoever. I'm not saying that. No, I'm saying it. I'm saying that Beltran probably wouldn't be a Hall of Famer if it wasn't for some of the other Hall of Famers in there. I don't think some of the guys in the Hall of Fame deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, and especially the newer classes. I mean, we talk about it all the time. Scott Rowland should not be in the Hall of Fame. Keith Hernandez and Don Mattingly should be in the Hall of Fame, but it's how it works, and you'll never see Don Mattingly or Keith Hernandez in the Hall whatsoever. But Scott Rowland's allowed in the Hall, and that means Carlos Beltran will be in the Hall of Fame.
Interesting. It'll be interesting. This is his second ballot, so I don't think it's going to happen this time. Maybe next year.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. We'll have to see. But yeah. I don't know. Is there any Hall of Famers that would be coming into the 2025 class that you think would be out of this world? I think the only one I could think of, well, when did Detroit retire? Let's see. 1 second.
Well, he officially retired in 2019. because that was, remember, he went to Japan and they had the whole like ceremony
Yeah.
for him and
So
everything.
next year will be Ichiro's first year. It'll be CC Sabathia's first year. It'll be. I mean, those are the only guys I think that actually have a chance. Looking at this list, Ian Kinsler, Felix Hernandez, Troy Tulowitzki, Curtis Granderson, Hanley Ramirez. Yeah, no, I think next year it's just going to be Ichiro and maybe CC Sabathia. Maybe.
CC will be interesting. I will say that it'll be interesting.
I think so too. Let's see.
Yeah.
Well, we are coming to the end of. Oh wait, the A's. Really quickly, we need to talk about the A's. The A's are probably the most embarrassing team, not just in baseball, but in all of sports. And anyone, I think, can agree with that. If you have somebody like Derek Fisher as your GM, who will not even acknowledge that A's fans are like sad because of this, the biggest. And the worst part about all of this, I mean, we've talked about this before. Derek Fisher is probably the biggest joke in baseball. But Rob Manfred is being made look like so much more. He's becoming so much more of a joke because of this stupid A's dilemma. I mean, if you're talking to the Brewers and telling them that they need to make renovations to their stadium, or else something will happen, but the A's stadium hasn't been renovated since God knows when, and you're just gonna let it keep on rolling on and not say anything and totally forget, like, hey, you want to know what? They are a Major League Baseball team. And hey, they do need to get better. I don't know what to tell you. The GMs unanimously have voted that the A's will be moving to Las Vegas.
We've gone over the whole thing about how bad this is for Oakland A's fans and everything. But I point something out that I was honestly really surprised by. 4 years they're going to be without a home. They don't officially move into a new stadium in Las Vegas until 2028. So they're going to go from minor league stadiums and all that stuff, which they did last in 2020 with the Blue Jays, if you remember. But that was understandable because they literally couldn't play in Canada. Like that was a world event. I could understand that. This is because of greed, plain and simple. And to do the Oakland fans wrong like this, to not even let them play in Oakland, somewhere in Oakland for the next few years, let the fans give a proper goodbye, maybe let the team get a little bit better so they can watch some a little bit competitive baseball. It's a slap in the face, and it just makes baseball look so terrible. Because honestly, I know the Oakland Raiders did this, but a lot of the Oakland Raiders fans kind of moved over to be the Las Vegas Raiders fans. I don't see a lot of the Oakland A's fans moving to Las Vegas to be the Las Vegas A's fans. I think you're going to see a lot of tourists that just want to go there. I think they're going to struggle. I really think they are. I don't think there's going to be a big fan base for them.
And it's just really an unfortunate situation, for this franchise as well, because what first comes to my mind was looking at the NBA as an example. Okay, so that's in California, with the Golden State Warriors, and they originally played at Oracle Arena, which was very near Oakland, California. They moved out of Oracle Arena, and moved over to a new place, Chase Arena, and so that took all the fans that used to go to Oracle Arena and watch the Warriors play. Now they're somewhere else, and now that's the same situation that the Oakland A's are in now. Moving out of Oakland and now to Las Vegas. But at the end of the day, it's a business. It's a business, and by them moving to Las Vegas, Rob Manfred is hoping that this is now an opportunity for baseball to expand, further out west in a big city in Las Vegas. But at the end of the day, I really do feel bad for A's fans because, as you mentioned, Anthony, they didn't get a chance to say a proper goodbye. Now they're going to be moving from minor league places all over the country. But I feel for the fans.
And the worst part to me is the fact that like Manfred he alluded to something like, well, we know this is disappointing for Oakland fans, and we know things didn't go the way that they wanted to go. But look how exciting this is. Like, how condescending is that? How you're wiping away decades of history here For what? For a business opportunity, and for a business opportunity that they really better hope works out in the long run. Sure, for the first couple of years, everybody's going to want to go and see the stadium, but really, I think it's going to be one of these situations where you're going to see a lot of opposing fans in there. You're not going to see many Oakland or Las Vegas A's hats in there. I'd be really shocked if you do in 35. Go to that year if they're not competitive. Are you really going to see A's fans in there? No, you're not. And go to the Oakland A's fans were there, man. Up until this past season where they knew they were getting abandoned, that stadium, there was always people in there. It was a lively energy. They had a loyal base there. And the way to expand the game is not this. It's not this. This loses you fans. It doesn't gain you fans.
No, and like people will say, well, the stadium is ugly. It's this, and that. Well, it used to be it was a football stadium and a baseball stadium. Uh, it if you don't do renovations to something, of course it's going to get ugly. I mean, it's no offense to the A's, but their main color is green. Green doesn't usually age well. That's just how it works. But it's another sad sight in Oakland. Derek Fisher said something like, "You think the fans are sad? We're 10 times sadder." No, you're not. You're making money off of this. Like, you can cry in bags of hundreds. It's fine for you. But A's fans will never see this again. I mean, you think Ricky Henderson would have wanted to play in Las Vegas? I mean, maybe, but he would rather be playing in front of loyal fans who weren't there just because they put a bet on him 5 hours ago.
And you're inviting a list of problems with gambling. They're still keeping Pete Rose out of it, and now they're going to Vegas.
They're keeping Pete Rose out of it. We know Yasiel Puig had problems across seas. It's not a good situation whatsoever. And I think in a couple of years people will forget about it and it'll be okay. Just like the rule changes, it's just how it's going to be working. But right now it's just incredibly sad and honestly a little pathetic to be watching.
I'm with you.
But with that, we are coming to the end of our show. We have another great week set for you next week. But for everyone who's watching, for everyone who celebrates Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving. Spend it with your loved ones. Talk about baseball. Talk about how Aaron Nola got a 7-year deal and will be 37 by the end of it, and how the Phillies will be, walking around with canes and gray beards by the end of these contracts. But we're excited, just like the Mets. Yeah, I mean, by then it'll probably be switched. I bet then we'll see Acuna in a Mets uniform, and we'll see Bryce Harper in, retirement home. Maybe we'll see. But thank you guys once again for coming, and we will see you next week.